The mansion had been silent for 2 years. Not peaceful, silent, the kind of quiet that pressed against your chest until you forgot how to breathe. But on this particular morning, something impossible happened. A child's laughter echoed through halls that had forgotten the sound, and in the doorway stood a billionaire father frozen in disbelief, staring at the poor young woman who had just accomplished what grief counselors, therapists, and 2 years of desperate prayers couldn't. His son was speaking again. But this miracle came with a price neither of them expected, and a love that would shatter every rule they'd built to survive. Stay with me until the end of this story. Hit that like button and drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from. I want to see how far this journey travels. The phone call came at 6:47 a.m., which Claire Dawson knew meant trouble, because her sister Sarah never called that early unless something had gone wrong. Please, Claire, please, I'm burning up and I can't lose this job. Claire pressed the phone against her ear, still half asleep, her studio apartment cold enough that she could see her breath. Sarah, slow down. What are you talking about? Mr. Sterling, the family I work for, I'm supposed to be there in 40 minutes and I can barely stand up. If I call in sick again, they'll replace me. You know they will. Rich people don't keep unreliable staff. Claire sat up, her second-hand blanket falling away. You want me to cover your shift? Just today. Just this once. I'll send you the address and tell you everything you need to know. Please, Claire. You're the only person I can ask. That was how Claire found herself an hour later, standing outside iron gates that probably cost more than her entire year's rent, staring up at a mansion that looked like something out of a magazine she couldn't afford to buy. Her sister's borrowed uniform hung loose on her smaller frame. The morning sky pressed down gray and heavy, threatening rain that smelled like metal. The intercom crackled when she pressed the button. Name and purpose. The voice sounded bored, mechanical. Claire Dawson. I'm filling in for Sarah Dawson today, the housekeeping position. A pause, long enough that Claire wondered if they'd disconnected. Then the gates began to swing open with a low hum that felt more like a warning than a welcome. The driveway curved through grounds so carefully maintained they looked artificial. Every hedge sat at exactly the right angle. Every flower bed coordinated in colors that probably had names Claire had never heard. But something felt wrong about the perfection. It was too controlled, too rigid, like someone had hired an army to strangle nature into submission. The mansion itself rose up like something that wanted to intimidate. Gray stone, sharp angles, windows that reflected the cloudy sky back at her like mirrors refusing to let anyone see inside. Claire's beat-up Honda looked obscene parked in front of it, a wounded animal limping into a palace. She was reaching for the doorbell when the door opened. The man standing there made her breath catch, not because he was handsome, though he was, in that sharp-edged way that came from too much stress and not enough sleep. What struck her was the exhaustion carved into his face. He wore a suit that probably cost more than her car, tailored so precisely it might as well have been painted on. But his eyes held the kind of emptiness Claire had seen before in the pediatric grief counseling videos she'd studied. You're Sarah's sister. Not a question. His voice carried the flat tone of someone going through motions. Yes, sir. Claire, I'm so sorry about the last minute. Is she actually sick, or did she quit and send you to soften the blow? The bluntness startled her. She has a fever of 102. She wanted to come anyway, but I wouldn't let her. Something flickered in his expression. Not quite approval, but close. You're honest. That's rare. He stepped back, gesturing her inside. Nathaniel Sterling. Most people call me Mr. Sterling. You can do the same. The entrance hall swallowed her. Marble floors that gleamed like still water. A staircase that curved upward like a photograph, each step exactly the same height. Artwork on the walls that Claire recognized from her art history textbook. Originals, not prints. But the space felt cold. Not temperature cold, emotionally cold. Like a museum after hours. Your sister told you about my son. Again, not a question. She mentioned you had a 5-year-old, Liam. Nathaniel's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. What else did she mention? Claire hesitated. Sarah had told her the basics during their rushed phone call. The mother had died 2 years ago. The kid barely spoke anymore. The household staff walked on eggshells. But something in Nathaniel's expression told her he was testing her, seeing if she'd repeat gossip. Just that he might be shy. And that I should be patient. Shy? Nathaniel let out a breath that wasn't quite a laugh. That's diplomatic. He checked his watch, a gesture that looked automatic. I have meetings starting at 9 and running until at least 6. Your sister's duties are primarily downstairs, kitchen, living areas, the main bathrooms. Liam's nanny handles his room and the upstairs, but she doesn't come in until 10 on Tuesdays. So I'll be alone with him until then? He won't bother you. He doesn't bother anyone. The way Nathaniel said it made Claire's chest ache, like he was describing a piece of furniture instead of his child. There's breakfast in the refrigerator if he's hungry. He probably won't eat much. Don't take it personally. He doesn't eat much for anyone. Claire watched Nathaniel gather his briefcase, his phone, his keys, each movement precise and controlled. A man who'd learned to function by following the same patterns every day because deviating meant feeling things he'd buried. Mr. Sterling, the words came out before she could stop them. What is he like? Nathaniel paused at the door, his back to her. For a long moment he didn't move. I don't know anymore. His voice came out rough. I don't think he knows anymore either. Then he was gone, the door closing with a soft click that somehow sounded final. Claire stood alone in the vast entrance hall, listening to the silence press against her eardrums. Somewhere in this enormous house was a 5-year-old child who'd forgotten how to be a child, and she had exactly 8 hours to figure out how to reach him. She found him in what had to be the living room, though calling it that felt wrong. It was more like a showroom, everything positioned at exact angles, cream-colored furniture that looked like no one had ever sat on it, a fireplace so clean it might never have held fire. And in the middle of all that expensive emptiness, a small boy sat on the floor with a worn stuffed elephant, building a tower out of wooden blocks. Claire stopped in his doorway, her training kicking in before she could overthink it. Don't approach too fast, don't loom, don't force eye contact. Let the child control the interaction. She sat down on the floor about 6 feet away from him, close enough to be present, but far enough not to feel invasive. Liam didn't look up. His small hands moved with careful precision, placing each block on top of the last. The stuffed elephant sat beside him, one of its ears torn and badly resewn, its trunk stained from what looked like years of being clutched during sleep. That's a good tower, Claire said quietly. Not gushing, not performing enthusiasm, just stating a fact. Liam's hands paused for maybe half a second. Then he continued building. I used to build towers when I was your age. Mine always fell down, though. I wasn't as careful as you. Nothing. The boy added another block. The tower swayed slightly, but held. Claire didn't push. She just sat there, watching him work, letting the silence exist without trying to fill it. This was the part they taught in her child development classes that most people got wrong. Adults were terrified of quiet. They felt compelled to fix it, to fill it with words and questions and forced cheer. But kids who'd been through trauma needed the quiet. They needed to know that silence was safe, that they wouldn't be interrogated or demanded from. After what felt like 10 minutes but was probably closer to 3, Liam spoke. Elephant builds towers too. His voice came out thin and unused, like something that had been in storage. Claire felt her heart crack a little, but kept her expression neutral. Does Elephant have a name? Liam didn't answer. He placed another block. The tower wobbled dangerously. Claire watched his face tighten in concentration as he steadied it with both hands, holding his breath until it settled. I had a bear when I was little, Claire continued, keeping her voice low and even. His name was Mr. Buttons because he had button eyes. One of them fell off and my mom sewed it back on crooked, so he always looked surprised. The corner of Liam's mouth twitched. Not quite a smile, but close enough that Claire felt a tiny spark of hope. Elephant doesn't have buttons, Liam said seriously. Just regular eyes. Regular eyes are good too. Better for seeing things. Yeah. Liam positioned another block. His tower was getting impressively tall now, teetering at the edge of physics. Elephant sees everything. What does Elephant see right now? You. What does Elephant think about me? Liam finally looked up, and Claire got her first clear view of his face. He had his father's sharp features softened by age, but his eyes held something that made her throat tighten. Not just sadness, resignation, like he'd already learned that the world was a place that took things away, and there was no point getting attached to anything new. Elephant thinks you're different than the other ones. The other housekeepers? They don't sit on the floor. He said it like this was a statement of cosmic significance. They clean and they leave and they don't talk to Elephant. Well, that's rude. Elephant seems very important. He is important. Liam's voice gained the slightest edge of defiance. He's the most important. I can tell. Does he help you build? He watches. He's good at watching. Claire glanced at the stuffed elephant, its button eyes staring ahead with that blank expression all stuffed animals had, but somehow seemed sadder on this particular one. She wondered how many tears it had absorbed, how many nightmares it had guarded against, how many times it had been the only witness to a small boy's grief. Would Elephant like to hear a story while you build? Liam's hands went still. He studied her with an intensity that seemed too old for 5. What kind of story? Any kind you want. Happy, sad, scary, funny, you pick. Not sad. The words came out sharp, almost fierce. No sad stories. Okay, no sad stories. How about funny? Liam considered this, then nodded once, quickly, like he was making a business decision. So Claire started telling him a story about a dragon who was afraid of mice, making her voice do different characters, adding sound effects that were probably ridiculous but made Liam's eyes widen. She'd learned this technique in her classes. Narrative therapy, they called it. Using stories to help kids process emotions indirectly, to show them it was safe to feel things through fictional distance. As she talked, Liam kept building his tower, but his movements became less mechanical, more natural. And when Claire made a particularly silly mouse voice, she saw it, a real smile breaking across his face like sun through heavy clouds. It lasted maybe 3 seconds, but it was real. By the time Liam's tower finally toppled over, because gravity eventually won every battle, nearly an hour had passed. Claire had told 3 stories and learned that Liam thought rhinoceroses were funny, that he hated green beans with a passion that bordered on philosophical, and that Elephant's full name was Elephant Trunkster III, a title bestowed by someone who was no longer here to confirm or deny it. Are you hungry? Claire asked as Liam started rebuilding his tower from the scattered blocks. Not really. When's the last time you ate? Liam shrugged with the elaborate casualness of a child trying to avoid answering. Tell you what, Claire said, standing up and stretching legs that had gone numb from sitting cross-legged. I'm going to make lunch. You can keep building. But if you get hungry, come find me in the kitchen. Deal? Okay. She headed toward the kitchen, which turned out to be the kind of space that made her want to laugh and cry simultaneously. Professional-grade appliances that probably cost more than her college tuition. Marble countertops big enough to perform surgery on. A refrigerator that had 3 separate compartments and a screen on the front showing the internal temperature of each one. The refrigerator was stocked with ingredients so precisely organized they might have been alphabetized. She found bread that felt artisanal, because of course a billionaire wouldn't buy normal bread, and started assembling a simple sandwich. But as she worked, an idea struck her. In her child development classes, they'd talked about play therapy, art therapy, music therapy. But one of the guest lecturers had mentioned something simpler, food as communication. How the act of making something with care, of presenting it in a way that showed thoughtfulness, could break through walls that words couldn't. Claire got to work. 15 minutes later, she walked back into the living room carrying a plate that had been transformed. The sandwich wasn't just a sandwich anymore. She'd cut it into a face, with sliced strawberries for eyes, a baby carrot nose, and a curved slice of orange for a smile. A handful of grapes formed hair. It looked ridiculous and childish and exactly perfect. Liam looked up when she approached, and his eyes went wide. It's smiling, he whispered. Yeah, I thought lunch should be happy today. Food doesn't smile. This food does, and I think it wants to make you smile too. Liam stared at the plate like it was a puzzle he couldn't quite solve. Claire set it down next to him and started to walk away. Wait. His voice stopped her. Aren't you going to make me eat it? The question hit her harder than it should have. How many times had this kid been forced through the motions? How many well-meaning adults had turned eating into a battle of wills? Nope. It's there if you want it. If you don't, that's okay too. She went back to the kitchen and made herself a sandwich, normal, unsmiling, and ate it standing at the counter, listening to the silence from the other room. But after about 5 minutes, she heard small footsteps. Liam appeared in the kitchen doorway, holding the plate. Half the sandwich was gone. The strawberry eyes had disappeared. Elephant says thank you. You're welcome. What do you say? Thank you. The words came out automatically, rehearsed. But then he added, quieter, it was good. The smile part tasted better. Because happy food tastes better than sad food? Yeah. He said it with complete seriousness, like they were discussing scientific fact. Everything's been sad food for a long time. Claire felt her throat close up. This kid, this brave, broken 5-year-old standing in a kitchen bigger than her entire apartment, holding a plate with a half-eaten, smiling sandwich, talking about sad food like it was normal, like he'd forgotten that childhood was supposed to taste different. Well, she managed, keeping her voice steady, maybe we can make more happy food if you want. Liam nodded. Then, so quietly she almost missed it. Elephant's name is Trunkster. Just Trunkster. I made up the other part because Mom always said... He stopped. The shutters came down over his expression so fast Claire almost gasped. That's a good name, she said gently. Trunkster. It suits him. Liam turned and walked back to the living room without another word, but he was still carrying the plate. And when Claire followed a few minutes later to collect it, she found him sitting with Trunkster, the plate empty except for crumbs, telling the elephant very seriously that the lunch had been acceptable, which, Claire was learning, was Liam's version of high praise. Chinpaum shisum spetsan. The afternoon unfolded in small moments. Claire cleaned the way Sarah had instructed. The kitchen surfaces, the downstairs bathroom, the hardwood floors, but she did it in the living room where Liam could see her, where he didn't have to be alone. She didn't try to engage him constantly, just let him exist in the same space, building and rebuilding his towers while she worked around him. But every so often, she'd offer a comment, an observation, a tiny joke, and slowly, like ice melting so gradually you couldn't see it happening, Liam started responding more. Not in paragraphs, not in confessions or emotional breakthroughs, just in single words that grew into short phrases that occasionally bloomed into actual sentences. By 3 o'clock, when the nanny arrived, a stern-looking woman in her 50s who introduced herself as Mrs. Patterson and looked at Claire like she was a temporary inconvenience. Liam had built 7 different towers and told Trunkster 3 stories in voices clearly modeled after Claire's earlier performance. You can go now, Mrs. Patterson informed Claire. I'll take over from here. But Liam looked up, and something in his expression made Claire's decision. Actually, I was planning to stay until Mr. Sterling gets home. My sister asked me to complete the full shift. Mrs. Patterson's mouth tightened, but she didn't argue. She just swept Liam upstairs for his afternoon routine, which sounded ominous and institutional and nothing like what a 5-year-old should need. Claire used the time to finish the cleaning, but her mind was stuck on Liam. On the way he'd smiled at the food. The way he'd almost mentioned his mother before slamming the door shut on the memory. The way he moved through this enormous house like a ghost haunting his own life. She was wiping down the kitchen counters when the front door opened. Nathaniel Sterling walked in looking exactly as exhausted as he had that morning, his tie loosened, his jaw tight. He stopped when he saw Claire, like he'd forgotten she existed. You're still here. I told you I'd work the full shift. Most people leave early when they can. I'm not most people. His eyes narrowed slightly, reassessing. Where's Liam? Upstairs with Mrs. Patterson. They went up about an hour ago for his... But Nathaniel wasn't listening anymore, because from somewhere above them came a sound that made him freeze completely, his briefcase slipping from his hand and hitting the marble floor with a crack that echoed through the entrance hall. Laughter. A child's laughter, bright and unrestrained, tumbling down the stairs like music this house had forgotten how to play. Nathaniel stared at the staircase like it might be a hallucination. His face had gone pale. That's not... that's Liam, Claire confirmed quietly. He doesn't laugh. He hasn't laughed in... Nathaniel's voice cracked. What did you do? I made his lunch smile. You made his... what? But before Claire could explain, Liam came racing down the stairs with an energy she hadn't seen from him all day, Trunkster clutched in one hand. He saw his father, and his steps faltered, the brightness dimming slightly like he was remembering the rules. Dad, you're home. I'm home. Nathaniel's voice came out strangled. He dropped to one knee, and Claire watched something in his carefully controlled expression crack open. What were you laughing about? Mrs. Patterson slipped on Trunkster and said a bad word. But she said not to tell you. Despite everything, Nathaniel's mouth twitched. I won't tell her you told me. And Claire made Lunch smile. Look, Liam held up Trunkster. I told him about it, and he thinks it's funny because food doesn't usually have faces. Unless you're eating gingerbread men, but those are different because they're supposed to have faces, but sandwiches aren't supposed to. But Claire made it anyway, and it tasted better because happy food tastes better than sad food, and he stopped, suddenly aware he'd been talking. Really talking. More words strung together than he'd probably spoken in weeks. Nathaniel looked from his son to Claire, and the expression on his face was something she couldn't quite name. Shock, gratitude, fear, hope. All of it mixed together in a way that made him look younger and older simultaneously. Thank you, he said to Liam, for telling me about your day. Liam nodded seriously, then turned to Claire. Are you coming back tomorrow? The question hung in the air. Claire saw Nathaniel's shoulders tense, saw him trying to figure out how to answer without making promises he couldn't keep. I don't know yet, Claire said honestly. Today was just because my sister was sick. Oh, Liam's face fell. Okay. He headed back upstairs, his steps slower now. Trunkster dragged behind him. Nathaniel stood slowly, watching his son disappear. Then he turned to Claire, and when he spoke, his voice was rough, with something that might have been desperation. How much do you make at your current job? Claire blinked. I'm sorry? Your job. Whatever you do when you're not covering for your sister. How much do they pay you? I work 3 part-time positions. I make about... She stopped, uncomfortable. Why? Because I'll double it, triple it if I have to. Nathaniel's words came fast now, his composure slipping. I don't know what you did today. I don't understand it. But my son laughed. He talked. He's been in therapy for 18 months, and the most they've gotten out of him is one-word answers. You did more in 8 hours than trained professionals have done in a year and a half. Mr. Sterling, Don't say you just made Lunch smile. I need to understand. What are you? A child psychologist? A specialist? I'm a student. The words came out small. I work retail and waitressing to pay for classes. I'm studying child development because I want to help kids who've been through trauma, but I'm nobody. I don't have credentials or degrees or to... You have whatever it takes to reach him. Nathaniel's eyes bore into hers with an intensity that made her breath catch. I'm offering you a job, not as a maid, as... He struggled for the right word. As whatever you were today. Someone who can help him. Someone who can bring him back. I don't think I'm qualified to... Qualified? Nathaniel let out a harsh laugh. I've hired the most qualified people money can buy. They all say the same things. Give him time. Don't push. Let him process at his own pace. And maybe they're right. Maybe that's the correct approach. But it's been 2 years and I'm watching my son disappear a little more every day. And then you show up and make his sandwich smile, and suddenly he's telling me about his day like... His voice broke. Like he used to. Claire stood there in this billionaire's entrance hall, her sister's too big uniform hanging off her shoulders, facing a man who was offering her more money than she'd ever imagined to save a child she'd known for one day. Every logical part of her brain screamed that this was insane, that she wasn't equipped for this, that she'd gotten lucky today, but tomorrow Liam might retreat back into silence, and then what? She'd be fired from a job she had no business accepting in the first place. But she thought about Liam's face when he saw the smiling sandwich, the way he'd carefully said, acceptable, the way his laughter had sounded like something being born again. I'd need to know everything, she heard herself saying, about what happened to his mother, about his therapy, about what's been tried before. Nathaniel nodded. Whatever you need. And I'm still going to classes. I'm not dropping out of school. I'll work around your schedule. And if this doesn't work, if I can't help him the way you think I can, you can't blame me for that. I'm not a miracle worker. You already performed one miracle today. Nathaniel's voice dropped quieter. I'll take my chances on a second. Claire looked up in the staircase where a 5-year-old boy had disappeared, clutching a worn stuffed elephant and carrying the memory of Lunch that smiled. She thought about her cramped studio apartment and her maxed-out credit cards and her 3 part-time jobs that barely covered rent. She thought about all the reasonable, logical reasons to say no. Then she thought about Liam saying, Everything's been sad food for a long time. Okay, she whispered. I'll try. Nathaniel's shoulders sagged with relief so profound it was almost painful to witness. Thank you, thank you. I'll have my lawyer draw up a contract. You can start immediately, tomorrow, if you're available. I need to talk to my sister first, and my employers. Of course, whatever you need. He pulled out his phone. Give me your number. We'll work out the details. As Claire recited her number, watching Nathaniel type it into a phone that probably cost more than her laptop, she felt the world tilting beneath her feet. This morning she'd woken up in her tiny apartment thinking she'd spend the day scrubbing floors and counting down the hours. Now she was standing in a mansion that cost more than she'd earn in 10 lifetimes, employed by a billionaire to save his son from grief. The universe had a twisted sense of humor. One more thing, Nathaniel said as she gathered her coat to leave. What you said earlier, about being nobody. You're wrong about that. Claire turned back to him. Anyone who can make a child laugh after 2 years of silence? Nathaniel's expression held something that looked almost like wonder. That's not nobody. That's somebody my son needs. Maybe somebody we both need. The words followed Claire all the way home, through the rain that had finally started falling, through the traffic-clogged streets back to her neighborhood where buildings crowded together and nobody owned mansions. She sat in her apartment that night, staring at her phone, trying to process what had just happened. Her sister called at 8. How did it go? Was it terrible? Did they hate you? Sarah, Claire said slowly, I think I just agreed to the most insane job offer in history. What are you talking about? So Claire told her. About Liam and Trunkster and the smiling sandwich. About the laughter that had echoed through a silent mansion. About Nathaniel Sterling's desperate offer and her own inexplicable agreement. Sarah was quiet for a long time after Claire finished. You know this is crazy, right? She finally said. You're walking into a world you don't understand. Rich people aren't like us. They have different rules, different expectations. I know. And if you screw this up, if that kid gets worse instead of better, Sterling will destroy you. Men like him don't accept failure. I know that too. So why did you say yes? Claire thought about Liam's old eyes in his young face, about the way he'd whispered, everything's been sad food for a long time, like it was a universal truth. Because somebody has to try, she said quietly. And I think maybe I can. You think or you know? I think, but sometimes thinking is enough to start. Sarah sighed. Well, if you're doing this, do it right. Don't let them turn you into just another employee. That kid needs someone who sees him as a person, not a project. That's the only way I know how to see him. Then maybe you've got a shot. After they hung up, Claire sat in the dark, listening to her neighbor's television through the thin walls, trying to imagine what tomorrow would bring. She'd agreed to enter a world where people had more money than problems, where mansions stayed silent because no amount of wealth could buy back what grief had stolen. But she'd also agreed to try saving a child who'd forgotten how to be a child. And somewhere in a mansion across town, a 5-year-old boy was probably clutching Trunkster, maybe remembering that lunch had smiled at him today, maybe wondering if it would smile again tomorrow. Claire pulled out her laptop and started researching. Childhood grief, selective mutism, trauma responses in young children. She read until her eyes burned, taking notes, building a framework for what she was walking into. Because Nathaniel Sterling was wrong about one thing. Today hadn't been a miracle. It had been luck and timing and a sandwich arranged into a smile. Tomorrow she'd need more than that. Tomorrow she'd need to actually know what she was doing. The thought terrified her, but not enough to make her quit before she'd even started. Claire's first official day started with a contract that required 3 signatures and made her feel like she was signing her life away to someone who could afford better lawyers than she could ever imagine hiring. Nathaniel's attorney, a sharp-eyed woman named Patricia Caldwell, who wore glasses that probably cost more than Claire's monthly grocery budget, walked her through 14 pages of terms and conditions in a conference room that overlooked the city like they owned it. You understand that you're being hired as a family support specialist, Patricia said, her pen tapping against the mahogany table. Not a nanny, not a housekeeper. Your primary responsibility is Liam Sterling's emotional well-being and development. I understand. You'll have access to all therapeutic records, medical history, and previous treatment plans. Everything is confidential. Violating that confidentiality will result in immediate termination and legal action. Claire nodded, trying not to feel intimidated by the way Patricia's eyes seemed to calculate her net worth and find it laughable. Your salary will be deposited bi-weekly. Health insurance begins immediately. Mr. Sterling has also established an education fund to cover your remaining tuition and expenses. That made Claire's head snap up. Wait, what? He believes your continued education benefits Liam's care. The fund covers tuition, books, and reasonable academic expenses. It's outlined in Section 7, Paragraph 3. Claire flipped through the pages, her hands shaking slightly. She'd been prepared for good money. Nathaniel had promised that. But paying for her school? That was something else entirely. That was the kind of thing that made her feel like she owed him more than just showing up and doing her job. This is too much, she heard herself saying. Patricia's expression didn't change. Mr. Sterling disagrees. Do you want the position or not? Claire thought about Liam, about the way he'd clutched Trunkster and whispered that everything had been sad food for a long time, about a 5-year-old kid living in a mansion that felt like a mausoleum. She signed. An hour later, she was back at the Sterling estate, this time parking her Honda in the staff area behind the house where it wouldn't offend the aesthetic. Nathaniel met her at a side entrance she hadn't known existed, already dressed for work, but moving with the nervous energy of someone who didn't know what to do with his hands. Liam's been asking about you since yesterday, he said without preamble. He wanted to know if you were coming back. I told him yes, but I don't think he believed me. Kids who've lost people learn not to believe in permanence. Nathaniel's eyes sharpened. You've studied this. I stayed up until 3 reading about childhood grief and trauma responses. I'm not going into this blind. Something in his expression shifted. Relief, maybe. Or respect. Mrs. Patterson will be here at 10. She handles his schedule, meals, bath time, bedtime routine, but I want you to have final say on anything involving his emotional care. That's going to make her hate me. She already hates change. She'll adjust. Nathaniel checked his watch, that automatic gesture again. I need to leave in 10 minutes. His therapist appointments are Thursdays at 2. Dr. Morrison, she'll want to meet with you. What's her approach been so far? Play therapy, slow integration. She's very gentle, very patient, very ineffective. The bitterness in his voice was sharp enough to cut. 18 months, and the most progress she's documented is that Liam will sometimes draw pictures of his feelings instead of just sitting in silence. Claire absorbed this. What did his mother die from? The question made Nathaniel go still. For a moment she thought he wouldn't answer. Then he spoke, his voice carefully controlled in that way people used when talking about wounds that hadn't healed. Car accident, black ice. She was coming home from her sister's house. Liam was supposed to be with her, but he'd been fussy that morning, so she left him with me. He paused. He spent 2 years thinking it was his fault, because if he'd gone with her, maybe she would have driven differently. Maybe she would have been more careful. Maybe she'd still be alive. And you spent 2 years thinking it was your fault because you let her drive alone. Nathaniel's jaw clenched. I don't pay you to psychoanalyze me. You pay me to help your son, which means understanding the whole picture. Grief isn't isolated. It's contagious. Liam's carrying his and probably some of yours too. They stared at each other across the kitchen. This ridiculous, enormous kitchen with its 3-compartment refrigerator and marble countertops. And Claire saw the exact moment Nathaniel decided whether to fire her or trust her. Her name was Catherine, he said quietly. She was the only person who ever called me Nate. Everyone else has always used Nathaniel. Too formal to shorten, she used to say. But she did it anyway. What was she like? Stubborn, funny. She had this laugh that started quiet and then just took over her whole body. She couldn't tell a joke without laughing before she got to the punchline. His voice cracked slightly. Liam has her laugh. When he used to laugh. Before. He laughed yesterday. I know. That's why you're here. Nathaniel grabbed his briefcase, his armor sliding back into place. I have to go. Just do whatever you did yesterday. Make lunch smile. Tell stories. I don't care how ridiculous it seems. If it works, do it. Then he was gone, and Claire was alone in the mansion again, listening to the silence press against her eardrums like water. She found Liam in the same spot as yesterday, the living room floor, building towers with Trunkster standing guard. But today he looked up when she entered, and something in his expression made her chest ache. Hope, fragile and tentative, like a bird that had been caged so long it didn't trust open doors. You came back. I told you I didn't know if I could, but I wanted to, so I figured out how to make it work. Liam processed this with that too serious expression. Are you going to stay for a long time, or just today? Claire sat down on the floor 6 feet away, the same position as yesterday. I'm going to stay as long as you want me to. How's that sound? What if I want you to stay forever? The question hit harder than it should have. Then I guess we'll figure out what forever looks like, one day at a time. Liam nodded slowly, then held up Trunkster. Trunkster wants to know if you're going to make lunch smile again. Does Trunkster want lunch to smile? Yeah, he said yesterday's lunch was the best lunch in a really long time. Well, we can't disappoint Trunkster. That would be rude. The corner of Liam's mouth twitched. Not quite a smile, but close. Mrs. Patterson says I shouldn't talk about Trunkster like he's real. She says I'm too old for pretend. Mrs. Patterson sounds like she forgot how to use her imagination. That's what I think too, but I didn't say it because that would be disrespectful. Probably smart. But between you and me and Trunkster, imagination is the most important thing people have. It's how we figure out who we want to be. Liam considered this with the gravity of a judge deliberating a verdict. My mom used to say imagination is like a muscle. You have to exercise it or it gets weak. It was the first time he'd mentioned his mother directly. Claire kept her voice carefully neutral. Your mom sounds like she was smart. She was the smartest. She knew everything, like why the sky is blue and why dogs can't eat chocolate and why... He stopped abruptly, the shutter slamming down again. I'm not supposed to talk about her. Who said that? Dr. Morrison. She says talking about mom makes me sad and I should focus on happy things instead. Claire felt anger flash through her, quick and hot. What kind of therapist told a grieving 5-year-old not to talk about his dead mother? But she kept it off her face, kept her voice gentle. You know what I think? I think talking about people we love keeps them alive in a different way. Not the same way as before, but still important. Liam stared at her with those old eyes. Really? Really? Your mom knew about imaginations being like muscles, right? That's important information. If you never tell anyone, then that knowledge disappears. But if you talk about it, then other people learn it too. And that way part of your mom keeps teaching people things even though she's not here. Like she's still here but different? Exactly like that. Liam sat with this for a long moment, his small hands resting on Trunkster's worn fabric. Then he spoke so quietly, Claire almost missed it. She used to make pancakes shaped like animals. Elephants were my favorite. She'd use blueberries for the eyes, and the trunk was just extra batter, but it always looked perfect. We'd have elephant pancakes every Sunday. That sounds wonderful. Yeah. His voice wobbled. I miss elephant pancakes. Of course you do. They sound pretty great. Mrs. Patterson makes regular pancakes. They're fine, but they're just circles. She says shaped pancakes are impractical. Claire felt that anger again. Well, Mrs. Patterson clearly has strong opinions about pancakes. But you know what? Maybe one Sunday we could make elephant pancakes together, if you wanted, to remember your mom's recipe. Liam's head snapped up. You'd do that? Why wouldn't I? Because everyone else acts like mom never existed. They put away all her pictures and they don't say her name and they get all weird and quiet if I mention her, like she's a secret. She's not a secret, she's your mom, and people who loved her should be able to talk about her without everything getting weird. That's what I think, too. Liam's voice was fierce now, passionate in the way kids got when adults finally validated something they'd been feeling alone. I think about her every single day. I think about her laugh and her smell and the way she'd sing in the car, even though Dad said she couldn't carry a tune. I think about how she'd read me stories and do all the voices, and she'd always let me stay up late on Fridays to watch movies, even though Dad said I needed consistent bedtimes. Claire watched him talk, words spilling out faster now, like a dam breaking. This was what Dr. Morrison's gentle patience had missed. Liam didn't need someone carefully avoiding the grief. He needed someone willing to wade into it with him. She sounds like she was pretty amazing, Claire said when he paused for breath. She was the most amazing. And then she died, and everyone started acting like if we don't talk about her, it'll hurt less, but it doesn't hurt less, it just hurts lonely. Hurts lonely. That's exactly the right way to say it. Liam looked at her with something like wonder. You get it. I get it. Dr. Morrison doesn't get it. She's nice, but she's always trying to make me feel better. And sometimes I don't want to feel better. I just want to feel sad because Mom died. And that's sad. And pretending it's not sad doesn't make it less sad. It just makes it fake sad. Claire felt her throat tighten. This kid, this brilliant, articulate, emotionally aware 5-year-old who'd been told to suppress his grief in the name of healing. You're allowed to be sad, she said firmly. Being sad about losing your mom doesn't mean you're broken. It means you loved her, and that's good. That's important. Liam was quiet for a moment. Then he crawled across the space between them, breaking his own careful distance, and leaned against her shoulder. Not quite a hug, just proximity, contact. I'm really glad you came back, he whispered. Claire's hand came up automatically to rest on his small back. Me too, kid. Me too. They sat like that for several minutes, Liam's breathing eventually evening out into something calmer. Trunkster sat abandoned on the floor, his button eyes watching over them. When Liam finally pulled back, his face was blotchy but clearer somehow, like crying had washed something away. Can we make lunch smile again? Absolutely. But today you have to help. Deal? Deal. In the kitchen, Claire taught him how to arrange food into faces. He took the task seriously, his tongue poking out in concentration as he positioned grapes and sliced strawberries. His first attempt looked more like an abstract art than a face, but he was so proud of it that Claire felt her heart crack a little. This is a happy lunch, he declared. Maybe the happiest lunch ever made. I think you might be right. They ate together at the kitchen island, something Claire suspected wasn't normally done because Liam kept glancing toward the formal dining room like he was expecting someone to stop them. But no one did. It was just the two of them and their smiling lunches and Trunkster sitting on the counter, keeping watch. Can I ask you something? Liam said through a mouthful of sandwich. Sure. Are you going to leave like everyone else? The question was so direct it winded her. What do you mean? People keep leaving. Mom left because she died. Then the nice housekeeper left because she got a different job. Then the lady who used to read to me left because she moved away. Everyone leaves eventually. Claire set down her sandwich, meeting his eyes directly. I'm not planning to leave, but I also can't promise I'll be here forever because life is weird and unpredictable, and sometimes things happen that we can't control. What I can promise is that if I ever do have to leave, I'll tell you first. I won't just disappear, okay? Liam thought about this. That's fair. Mom didn't mean to leave either. The ice made her crash. It wasn't her fault. No, it definitely wasn't her fault. And it wasn't your fault either. I know that now. Dr. Morrison explained it lots of times, but knowing it in my brain and knowing it in my heart are different things. That's very wise. Most adults don't understand that difference. I'm pretty smart for my age. I've noticed. Mom said I was smart like her and stubborn like Dad. She said that combination was going to either make me amazing or impossible, and probably both at the same time. Claire laughed. She was definitely right about that. The afternoon unfolded easier than Claire expected. She'd planned activities based on her research, art therapy exercises, storytelling prompts, simple games designed to encourage emotional expression. But Liam led the way more than she did, his natural curiosity surfacing once he realized she wouldn't shut down his questions or redirect him away from uncomfortable topics. He showed her his room, a space that looked like it belonged in a magazine, except for the corner where his actual personality lived. A pile of books with worn covers, a collection of rocks he'd found in the garden, a shoebox filled with drawings he wouldn't let anyone else see. These are private, he explained seriously, but you can look if you want. The drawings were heartbreaking. His mother in various scenes, always smiling, sometimes with wings, because he wasn't sure if people who died became angels or just disappeared. Pictures of the three of them, Liam, Nathaniel, Catherine, labeled before. And then pictures of just him and his father, the space where Catherine should have been carefully left blank. These are really good, Claire said, her voice thick. The blank parts are on purpose. That's where Mom is supposed to be, but I can't draw her there because she's not there anymore. But if I don't leave the space, it feels like I'm forgetting she was ever there at all. So the blank space is how you remember her. Yeah. He looked relieved that she understood. Dr. Morrison said I should draw happy things instead, like puppies and rainbows. But puppies and rainbows don't tell the truth. No, they don't. You're different than other grown-ups. How so? You don't try to fix everything. You just listen. Sometimes listening is the only fix people need. When Mrs. Patterson arrived at 10, she took one look at Claire and Liam sitting on the floor surrounded by drawings and pressed her lips into a thin line. I see you've made yourself comfortable. Claire stood, brushing off her jeans. Liam was showing me his artwork. He's very talented. Art time is scheduled for 3 p.m. on Wednesdays and Saturdays. Structure is important for children recovering from trauma. Structure is important, Claire agreed carefully, but so is flexibility. If Liam wants to draw at 10 a.m. on a Tuesday, I don't see the harm. Mrs. Patterson's eyes went cold. Mr. Sterling hired you for emotional support. I handle the schedule and routine. Let's not overstep our boundaries. Of course. Claire kept her voice neutral, but she saw Liam watching the exchange with worried eyes. I'll let you take over. Liam, I'll see you after lunch? He nodded, clutching Trunkster a little tighter. Outside the room, Mrs. Patterson caught her arm. A word of advice, these people aren't your friends. Mr. Sterling may be paying you well, but that doesn't make you family. You're staff. The boy will form attachments, and then you'll leave, and he'll be hurt again. So don't make promises you can't keep. Claire met her eyes steadily. I don't plan on leaving. They all say that. After Mrs. Patterson disappeared upstairs with Liam, Claire spent the afternoon researching childhood trauma specialists and reading everything she could find about selective mutism, grief in young children, and attachment theory. She made notes, drew diagrams, built a framework for how to approach the next few weeks. But her concentration kept breaking. She kept thinking about what Mrs. Patterson had said. Your staff. The boy will form attachments. She wasn't wrong. Claire was staff. This wasn't her family, wasn't her world. She was a poor girl from a bad neighborhood playing pretend in a billionaire's mansion. Except Liam didn't feel pretend. His grief was real. His progress was real. And the way he'd leaned against her shoulder, trusting her with his weight, that had been real too. Nathaniel came home at 6:30, earlier than yesterday, and found Claire in what she'd mentally labeled the library, even though it was really just a room with expensive books that looked like they'd never been read. How was day one officially employed? Good. Complicated. Mrs. Patterson hates me. Mrs. Patterson hates everyone. How was Liam? He talked about his mother, a lot. He showed me drawings, told me about elephant pancakes. Nathaniel's expression cracked. Catherine's Sunday pancakes. He hasn't mentioned those in over a year. He said people act like she never existed, like she's a secret. We were told, the therapist said. Nathaniel stopped, running a hand through his hair. Dr. Morrison recommended we remove triggers, photos, belongings, anything that might cause emotional regression. She said creating a new normal would help him move forward. By pretending his mother never existed? By not dwelling on what he lost. He's 5. He's not dwelling. He's grieving. There's a difference. They stared at each other, tension crackling in the air between them. You've been here 2 days, Nathaniel said finally. You really think you know better than a licensed therapist with 15 years of experience? I think I know Liam, and Liam needs to talk about his mother without everyone getting weird about it. And if talking about her makes him sad, then he'll be sad. But he'll be honestly sad instead of pretending to be okay sad. Which one sounds healthier to you? Nathaniel was quiet for a long moment. Then he walked to the bookshelf and pulled down a leather-bound album Claire hadn't noticed. When he opened it, photographs spilled out, Catherine laughing at the camera, Liam as a toddler, family portraits that looked genuinely happy. She was terrible at organizing photos, he said quietly. Always meant to put them in albums properly. Never got around to it. Can I see? He handed her the album. Claire paged through slowly, watching Catherine's face appear again and again. She had been beautiful in an unconventional way, sharp features, wide smile, eyes that crinkled when she laughed. She looks like she was fun. She was impossible, stubborn as hell. She'd argue with me about everything just because she enjoyed the debate. Couldn't cook to save her life except for those damn pancakes, which she'd perfected out of sheer spite after I said shaped pancakes were unnecessarily complicated. His voice was rough with memory. And she loved Liam more than anything in this world, more than me, more than herself. If she'd known, if she'd had any idea that driving home in bad weather would... He couldn't finish, just stood there holding the album, looking more lost than Claire had ever seen him. "Liam needs these," she said gently, "not hidden away, not forbidden. He needs to see her face and remember that she was real. What if it makes things worse? What if it makes things better?" Nathaniel looked at her, really looked at her, and Claire saw something shift behind his eyes. Trust, maybe. Or desperation. Or both. "Okay," he said finally. "Okay. Tomorrow you can put some photos up in Liam's room. Nothing in the rest of the house. I'm not ready for that yet. But his space can have her in it. Thank you." "Don't thank me. Just make sure this works. Make sure I'm not making a mistake trusting you." "I'll do my best." "Your best got him to laugh yesterday and talk about Catherine today. So far your best is better than anything else I've tried." He closed the album carefully. "There's something else. Thursday appointments with Dr. Morrison. I want you there. She's not going to like that. I don't care. You need to see how she works with him, and she needs to understand you're part of his care team now." The next morning, Claire arrived with a plan. She'd printed some of the photos from the album. Nathaniel had texted her digital copies late the night before, unable to sleep. Catherine making silly faces. Catherine and Liam baking together. One beautiful shot of all three of them, wind-blown and happy at what looked like a beach. Liam's eyes went wide when he saw them. "That's Mom. Your dad said it was okay to put some pictures in your room, if you want them." "I want them." His voice came out fierce. "I want all of them." Together they chose where each photo should go. Liam directed with the seriousness of a museum curator, explaining why certain pictures belonged in certain spots. The baking photo near his bookshelf because his mom used to read him recipes like bedtime stories. The beach photo on his nightstand because it was the last good day before everything changed. When Mrs. Patterson saw what they'd done, her mouth tightened into that disapproving line. But she didn't say anything. Maybe because Liam looked happier than he had in months. Maybe because she knew Nathaniel had approved it. Thursday came faster than Claire expected. Dr. Morrison's office was in a building downtown that tried too hard to look calming. Soft colors, gentle music, motivational posters about growth and healing. The doctor herself was younger than Claire anticipated, probably mid-30s, with kind eyes and a voice trained to soothe. "You must be Claire. Nathaniel mentioned you'd be joining us." "I hope that's all right." "Of course. Collaborative care is always beneficial." But her smile was professional, distant. "Liam, how are you feeling today?" Liam shrugged, clutching Trunkster. The session followed a predictable pattern. Dr. Morrison asked gentle questions. Liam gave minimal answers. They played with toys meant to encourage emotional expression, but Liam just went through the motions. Until Dr. Morrison brought up family. "Have you been thinking about happy memories this week?" Liam glanced at Claire. "I've been thinking about Mom." Dr. Morrison's smile tightened almost imperceptibly. "We talked about focusing on present happiness. Dwelling on the past can prevent us from moving forward." But Claire said talking about Mom keeps her alive in a different way. The room went very quiet. Dr. Morrison's eyes cut to Claire with something that wasn't quite accusation, but close. "Did she?" Claire kept her voice level. "Liam mentioned he felt like his mother was a secret. I told him it was healthy to remember people we've lost." "And do you have a degree in child psychology, Claire?" "No, but I do have common sense about grief." The tension could have been cut with a knife. Liam looked between them, his shoulders hunching. Dr. Morrison's professional mask never cracked. "Nathaniel, perhaps we should discuss Claire's role in Liam's care after the session." But Nathaniel surprised them all. "Actually, I think Claire's approach is working better than yours has. No offense. I understand you're frustrated with the pace of progress, but trauma recovery isn't linear. Patience is. It's been 18 months. My son barely speaks in your sessions. Then Claire shows up and suddenly he's talking about his mother, showing emotions, engaging with the world. So maybe your approach isn't the only valid one." Dr. Morrison's professional composure finally cracked. "If you're unhappy with my care, you're welcome to seek another therapist." "Maybe I will." The session ended badly. Dr. Morrison was coldly polite. Nathaniel was grimly satisfied, and Liam seemed relieved to escape. In the car ride home, Liam spoke up from the back seat. "I didn't like Dr. Morrison anyway. She always wanted me to play with the sad doll and the happy doll, but dolls aren't real feelings. Nathaniel caught Claire's eye in the rearview mirror. She saw the question there. Did I just make a huge mistake? She shook her head slightly. No, you did the right thing. That evening, after Liam had gone to bed, Nathaniel found Claire in the kitchen making herself tea. I fired our therapist today because of you. I noticed. That was incredibly unprofessional of me. Probably, and yet I don't regret it. He leaned against the counter, exhaustion evident in every line of his body. Do you know what it's like watching your child disappear? Knowing something's wrong but not knowing how to fix it? Hiring expert after expert and getting nowhere? I can't imagine. And then you show up and make Lunch smile and suddenly he's laughing again, talking again, being a kid again. His voice dropped lower. You're terrifying, Claire Dawson. Terrifying. Because you make me hope. And hope is dangerous when you've learned not to trust it. They stood there in the too big kitchen with its marble countertops and professional appliances, the space between them charged with something Claire didn't want to name. I should go, she said quietly. It's getting late. Claire. The way he said her name made her stop. Thank you. For today. For all of it. I'm just doing my job. No, you're doing more than that. And we both know it. She left before she could respond, before she could acknowledge the truth in his words. Because he was right. This had stopped being just a job somewhere between Liam's first smile and his tears about elephant pancakes. This was becoming something else entirely, and that terrified her more than anything. The weeks that followed developed a rhythm that felt almost normal, which should have been Claire's first warning that nothing about this situation was actually normal at all. She arrived at the mansion each morning at 8, spent her days with Liam, and left around 6 when Nathaniel came home. Except Nathaniel started coming home earlier. First 6, then 5:30, then 5. And he'd find reasons to linger, asking about Liam's day, discussing progress, sharing small details about his own work that had nothing to do with his son. Claire told herself it was just a father wanting to be involved, that the way he looked at her when she explained Liam's latest breakthrough was simple gratitude, that the coffee he started making for her every morning, remembering exactly how she took it after she'd mentioned it once, was just politeness. She was lying to herself, and she knew it. Liam noticed before either of them acknowledged it. Kids always did. He started engineering situations that required both adults, asking Claire to stay for dinner to tell Nathaniel about something, insisting his father needed to see a drawing right away when Claire was still there, claiming he needed both of them to help with bedtime stories. You're being manipulative, Claire told him one afternoon when he'd orchestrated his third dinner invitation that week. Liam looked up from his coloring with complete innocence. I don't know what that word means. Yes, you do. You're smart enough to use philosophical correctly. You definitely know manipulative. Okay, fine. But Dad's happier when you're here, and you smile more when he's around, so I'm helping. Helping with what exactly? I don't know yet, but something. He went back to his coloring, the picture of casual conspiracy. Trunkster thinks you guys should be friends. We are friends. Different kind of friends, the kind where people look at each other weird when they think nobody's watching. Claire felt heat creep up her neck. We do not look at each other weird. You do. Mrs. Patterson noticed too. She said it's inappropriate, but I don't think she knows what she's talking about because Dad hasn't smiled this much since Mom died. And that seems pretty appropriate to me. Out of the mouths of 5-year-olds came observations that cut straight through pretense. Claire wanted to argue, to explain why this wasn't what Liam thought it was, but she couldn't find words that weren't lies. That evening, Nathaniel asked her to stay after Liam went to bed. They'd fallen into this pattern too, sitting in the living room that had stopped feeling like a museum and started feeling like an actual room where people existed. He'd pour wine she wasn't sure she should accept from her employer. They'd talk about Liam at first, then drift into other topics. His work, her classes, the city, nothing and everything. He's doing really well, Nathaniel said, handing her a glass of red that probably cost more than her textbooks. His new therapist said she's never seen a child make this kind of progress in such a short time. They'd found Dr. Sarah Chen 2 weeks after the disaster with Dr. Morrison, a specialist in childhood trauma who actually listened to Liam instead of trying to redirect him away from his grief. The difference had been immediate and stark. Dr. Chen's approach is better suited to him. She lets him lead. She said you've been doing textbook trauma-informed care without any formal training. Called it remarkable. I just treat him like a person who's been through something terrible instead of a problem that needs fixing. Most people don't know the difference. Nathaniel sat in the chair across from her, close enough that she could see the exhaustion lines around his eyes. He'd been sleeping better lately, but the last 2 years had carved permanent marks. Can I ask you something personal? That depends on how personal. Why child development? What made you want to work with traumatized kids? Claire took a sip of wine, buying time. Nobody had asked her that before. Not directly. My best friend in middle school lost her dad. Cancer. And everyone around her just wanted her to get over it and be normal again. Teachers, friends, even her own mom. Like grief had an expiration date. I watched her fall apart because nobody gave her permission to just be sad. What happened to her? She moved away before high school. We lost touch. Claire stared into her wine glass. But I always wondered if things would have been different if someone had just sat with her in the sadness instead of trying to rush her past it. So you're doing for other kids what nobody did for her? I guess. It sounds stupidly simple when you say it like that. It sounds like you have a purpose. That's not stupid. That's rare. Nathaniel leaned forward slightly, his eyes intent on her face. Do you know what I thought when I first met you? That I was too poor to understand your world? That you were too honest for it? He set down his wine glass. Everyone in my life wants something from me. Business partners want deals, employees want promotions, friends want access. Even the women I've dated since Catherine, and there haven't been many, they wanted the lifestyle or the status or the story of landing a billionaire. That must be lonely. It is, and then you show up, refuse to be impressed by any of it, and tell me I'm wrong about my own son's therapy. You have no idea how refreshing that was. Claire's heart was beating too fast. Nathaniel! I know this is complicated. You work for me. There are power dynamics and professional boundaries, and probably 50 reasons why I shouldn't be sitting here telling you this. He ran a hand through his hair, frustrated. But I can't stop thinking about you, and I don't know what to do about it. The confession hung in the air between them, heavy with implications. Claire knew she should leave, should establish boundaries, should remember that she was staff and he was her employer, and mixing those things up led to disaster. Instead, she heard herself say, I think about you too. The admission cost her. She saw it register on his face, surprise followed by something that looked like relief. Yeah? Yeah, which is a problem because I'm trying to help your son, and getting emotionally tangled up with you is the exact opposite of maintaining professional objectivity. Professional objectivity is overrated. Easy for you to say. You're not the one who will be called manipulative or opportunistic if people find out. Nathaniel's expression darkened. Anyone who said that about you would have to go through me first. That's very noble, but it doesn't change reality. You're Nathaniel Sterling, CEO, billionaire, widower, and I'm the girl you hired to fix your kid. There's no version of this that doesn't look bad from the outside. I don't care what the outside thinks. You should. Liam needs stability. He needs me to be a constant in his life, not someone who starts a messy relationship with his father and then disappears when it inevitably falls apart. Who says it would fall apart? Statistics, common sense, the fact that we're from completely different worlds. Claire stood up, needing distance. This is a bad idea. I know. Nathaniel stood too, crossing the space between them before she could retreat. But I haven't felt this alive in 2 years. You did that. Not just for Liam. For me, too. He was close enough now that she could feel the heat of him, smell his cologne mixed with coffee, and something uniquely him. Close enough that she could see the exact moment he decided to stop talking and kiss her instead. His mouth was warm and certain and completely overwhelming. Claire's brain short-circuited, caught between the should not and the want to. She knew this was crossing every line, knew tomorrow would bring complications, knew this could destroy everything she'd been building with Liam. But his hands were gentle on her face, and he was kissing her like she was something precious, and it had been so long since anyone had touched her like she mattered. She kissed him back. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Nathaniel rested his forehead against hers. Tell me this is a terrible idea and I'll back off. Tell me you want professional boundaries and I'll give them to you, but don't tell me you don't feel this too. I feel it, Claire's voice came out shaky. But feeling something doesn't make it right. What if it does, though? What if this is the most right thing I've done since Catherine died? Don't. She stepped back, putting necessary space between them. Don't compare this to her. That's not fair to anyone. I'm not comparing. I'm just saying I forgot what it felt like to want to come home, to look forward to something other than work, to have a conversation that wasn't about loss or business or maintaining appearances. His voice dropped. You gave me that, and I'm selfish enough to want more of it. Nathaniel, I know it's complicated, but we're both adults. We can figure it out. Can we? Because from where I'm standing, it looks like a disaster waiting to happen. Your son is finally healing. I'm finally helping someone the way I've always wanted to. If we do this and it goes wrong, we don't just hurt each other, we hurt him. The mention of Liam seemed to sober Nathaniel. He took a breath, some of the intensity fading from his expression. You're right. You're absolutely right. He moved to the window, putting more distance between them. I'm sorry. That was inappropriate. You're here for Liam, not to deal with my emotional mess. Claire wanted to take it back. Wanted to cross the room and tell him she didn't care about appropriate. That she wanted this despite all the logical reasons not to. But Liam's face floated in her mind, his trust, his progress, his need for stability. I should go, she said quietly. Claire, wait. Nathaniel turned back to her. Can we just see what this is? Without making it complicated? I'm not asking you to quit or move in or make some grand declaration. I'm just asking for a chance to figure out if this feeling is real or if it's just proximity and gratitude and loneliness. And how do we figure that out? Carefully, slowly, without involving Liam until we know what we're doing. He held her gaze. I haven't felt hope like this in a long time. Please don't ask me to pretend it doesn't exist. Every sensible part of Claire screamed at her to say no, to maintain boundaries, to protect herself and Liam from the inevitable fallout. But the part of her that had watched him transform from a frozen shell of a man into someone who laughed with his son again, who remembered how she took her coffee, who looked at her like she was someone worth seeing, that part won. Carefully, she agreed, and slowly. And the second it starts affecting Liam negatively, we stop. Agreed? Agreed. They stood there looking at each other, the air between them charged with everything unsaid. Then Nathaniel did something that surprised her. He smiled, really smiled, the kind that reached his eyes and transformed his whole face. I should probably walk you to your car like a gentleman instead of kissing you again. Probably. But I really want to kiss you again. That would violate the carefully and slowly agreement we just made. You're right. You're absolutely right. But he was still smiling, and Claire felt answering warmth bloom in her chest. He did walk her to her car, and he didn't kiss her again, but the way he looked at her before she drove away felt more intimate than any touch. Claire spent the drive home trying to process what had just happened. She'd crossed a line. Multiple lines. She was sleeping with her employer, except they hadn't actually slept together, had just kissed, which somehow felt more dangerous because it meant this was about connection rather than just attraction. Her phone rang as she pulled into her apartment complex. Sarah. Hey, sorry it's late. Are you sleeping with him? Claire nearly dropped the phone. What? No, why would you? Because you've been working there for 6 weeks, and you've mentioned his name in every single conversation we've had, and not in a my boss way, in a different way. Sarah. I'm not judging. Okay, I'm a little judging, but mostly I'm worried. This guy has enough money to destroy you if things go wrong. Things aren't going to go wrong because there's no things happening. Liar. Claire slumped against her steering wheel. We kissed, once, and agreed it was complicated and we need to be careful. Sarah was quiet for a long moment. Do you actually like him, or do you just like the idea of him? I don't know. Maybe both. He's different than I expected. He's not just the billionaire CEO, he's a father trying to save his son, and he's lonely in this way that feels familiar. Claire, honey, you can't save everyone. I'm not trying to save him. I'm trying to help Liam. Are you sure about that? The question haunted Claire after they hung up. Was she sure? Or had she gotten so caught up in the mansion and the money and the broken family that she'd lost sight of why she was really there? Sleep didn't come easy that night. She lay in her narrow bed in her studio apartment, listening to sirens and her neighbors fighting, and thought about Nathaniel in his mansion with rooms he probably never even entered. Two completely different worlds. Sarah was right to worry. This was a recipe for disaster. But when she closed her eyes, she didn't see the mansion or the money. She saw the way Nathaniel looked when Liam laughed, the way his whole face changed when his guard came down, the way he'd kissed her like she was oxygen and he'd been drowning. The next morning, she arrived at the mansion determined to be professional. Boundaries, distance, focus on Liam. Nathaniel met her at the door in running clothes, sweaty and slightly out of breath. "You run." The question came out before she could stop it. Started again last week, trying to remember what taking care of myself feels like. He grabbed a towel from the hall table, wiping his face. Liam's still asleep. Mrs. Patterson doesn't come until 9 on Fridays. Which meant they were alone. The realization hit them both at the same time. "I should shower," Nathaniel said, not moving. "I should check on Liam," Claire replied, also not moving. They stood there in the entrance hall, the morning light streaming through windows that were probably cleaned daily, the space between them humming with tension. "About last night," Nathaniel started. "Let's not. Let's just pretend it didn't happen and focus on what matters." "What if I don't want to pretend it didn't happen?" "Nathaniel, I know. Carefully, slowly. Professional boundaries." He stepped closer, still keeping distance, but close enough that she could see water droplets from his run clinging to his hair. "But I'm really bad at pretending, especially when what I'm pretending isn't real." "We agreed." "I agreed to be careful about Liam. I didn't agree to lie about how I feel about you." Claire's resolve was crumbling. "This is a terrible idea." "So you keep saying, but you're still here." "I'm here for Liam." "Liar." The word hit her. Not because it was mean, but because it was true. She was here for Liam, but she was also here for this. For the way Nathaniel looked at her like she was the answer to a question he'd stopped asking. For the feeling of mattering in a way that had nothing to do with being useful or needed. Before she could respond, footsteps sounded from upstairs. Small feet. Liam, awake earlier than usual. The spell broke. Nathaniel stepped back, the professional mask sliding into place so fast it was almost convincing. "I'll shower. You should—" "Yeah. I'll go see what he needs." She fled upstairs before she could do something stupid like kiss him in the entrance hall where Liam might see. But as she reached the landing, she heard Nathaniel's voice, quiet but clear. "For what it's worth, I think we're both liars." Liam was sitting on his bed with Trunkster, looking more awake than a 5-year-old had any right to be this early. "I heard voices. Is Dad home?" "He went running. He's back now." "He's been running a lot lately. Mrs. Patterson says it's because he's trying to avoid something, but she won't tell me what." Claire sat on the edge of his bed, reminded again that kids noticed everything. "Maybe he just likes running. Maybe. Or maybe he likes that you're here when he gets back." Liam studied her with those two old eyes. "Do you like my dad?" The direct question nearly winded her. "Of course I like him. He's a good father and—" "Not that kind of like, the other kind. The kind where people's faces get weird." "Liam? Because if you do, that's okay. I wouldn't mind." He hugged Trunkster tighter. "Mom would want Dad to be happy, and you make him happy. You make both of us happy. So if you wanted to stick around forever, that would be good." Claire felt her throat close up. This kid, this impossibly perceptive 5-year-old who'd been through more pain than most adults, giving his permission for something she hadn't even admitted she wanted. "It's more complicated than that, buddy." "Why?" "Because grown-up feelings are messy. And your dad is my boss. And I don't want to do anything that might hurt you if things go wrong." "What if things go right?" The question was so simple and so devastating. What if things went right? What if this wasn't a disaster waiting to happen, but something that could actually work? "Then I guess we'd all be pretty lucky," Claire said softly. "But we can't count on lucky. We have to be careful." Careful is boring. Careful keeps people from getting hurt. But too much careful means nobody gets to be happy. Liam spoke with the confidence of someone who'd thought this through extensively. "Trunkster and I talked about it. We decided you should stay forever, even if it's scary. You and Trunkster have strong opinions. We're very wise for our age." Claire laughed despite herself, pulling him into a hug. He went easily, still small enough to fit against her perfectly. You're definitely wise. I'll give you that. The day unfolded with careful normalcy. Claire and Liam did art projects, played games, made lunch smile, a tradition now that he insisted on daily. When Nathaniel came home at 4, earlier than ever, Liam announced they were all having dinner together because Mrs. Patterson had Fridays off and Claire couldn't possibly leave them alone to starve. We're not going to starve, Nathaniel said, amused. I can order food. But Claire can cook. She's been teaching me. We made lasagna. Both adults stared at him. You made lasagna? Nathaniel asked. Well, Claire made it, but I helped. I added the cheese layers and everything. And she said it's important for families to eat together, so we're practicing being a family. The word hung in the air. Family. Liam, Claire started, panic rising. It's okay, Nathaniel said quietly. We can eat together. If Claire doesn't mind. Claire looked between them, Nathaniel with his careful hope, Liam with his blatant scheming, and felt her last defenses crumble. Lasagna needs to bake for 45 minutes. Someone needs to set the table. Liam volunteered himself immediately, racing to the dining room with Trunkster in tow to arrange plates and forks with the same seriousness he'd shown arranging his mother's photos, which left Claire and Nathaniel alone in the kitchen while the lasagna baked. He's not subtle, Nathaniel observed. Not even a little bit. He basically just announced he's decided we're a family now. I noticed. They stood at opposite ends of the kitchen island, the marble expanse between them feeling both vast and insignificant. Claire, if this is too much, if we need to pump the brakes before Liam gets more invested. He's already invested. We passed that point weeks ago. So what do we do? I have no idea. Claire gripped the edge of the counter. Every smart part of my brain says this is crazy, that I should establish boundaries and keep things professional and not let a 5-year-old play matchmaker. But he's not wrong about any of it, about you being happier, about us being good together, about this feeling like something that could work if we let it. Nathaniel moved around the island slowly, like she was something that might spook and run. When he reached her, he didn't touch her, just stood close enough that she could feel the warmth of him. What if we stop pretending, he said quietly. What if we just acknowledge this is happening and figure it out as we go? That's a terrible plan. You have a better one? Claire thought about it, about carefully and slowly and all the logical reasons to keep distance, about Sarah's warnings and Mrs. Patterson's disapproval and the inevitable gossip if anyone found out. Then she thought about Liam's smile when he talked about them being a family, about the way Nathaniel looked at her like she was something miraculous, about the fact that for the first time in her life, she felt like she was exactly where she belonged. No, she admitted. I don't have a better plan. Nathaniel's hand came up to cup her face, his thumb brushing her cheek with devastating gentleness. So we try. Even though it's terrifying? Even though it's terrifying. This kiss was different than last night, softer, less desperate, like a promise instead of a question. Claire let herself sink into it, let herself believe that maybe, just maybe, this could be something real. From the dining room came Liam's voice. Are you guys kissing? Because Trunkster heard kissing sounds. They broke apart, both laughing, caught by a 5-year-old and his stuffed elephant. We're checking the lasagna, Nathaniel called back. That's not what checking lasagna sounds like. Claire buried her face in Nathaniel's shoulder, her body shaking with laughter. We're the worst at this. Absolutely terrible. But he was laughing too, holding her close, and for the first time the mansion didn't feel cold or empty. It felt like a home with people in it who were figuring out how to be happy again. Dinner was chaotic and perfect. Liam narrated everything Trunkster was supposedly thinking, which included detailed opinions on Claire's cooking and whether his father was sitting too far away from her. The lasagna was slightly burned on the edges, but nobody cared. They ate and laughed and cleaned up together like families did in movies Claire had watched but never quite believed existed in real life. After Liam went to bed, after stories and songs and promises that Claire would be back tomorrow, she and Nathaniel stood at her car in the driveway under stars that were barely visible through the city light pollution. So we're doing this, she said. Apparently we are. Your son is a menace. He gets it from his mother. Catherine was shameless about meddling in people's lives. Nathaniel smiled at the memory, and Claire saw no pain in it, just warmth. She would have liked you. You think? I know. She always said I needed someone who wouldn't put up with my bullshit. Someone who'd call me out when I was being stubborn or stupid or too caught up in work to remember what mattered. He pulled Claire closer. That's you. You make me better. Both of us better. No pressure or anything. I'm serious. You walked into our lives and reminded us how to live instead of just survive. That's not a small thing. Claire rested her head against his chest, listening to his heartbeat. Strong and steady and real. I'm scared, she admitted. I'm terrified this is going to blow up and hurt everyone. Me too, but I'm more scared of letting you walk away because I was too afraid to try. They stood there holding each other until the cold drove them apart. Claire drove home with her heart full and her mind spinning, already dreading and anticipating tomorrow in equal measure. This was happening. Against all logic, against all her better judgment, she was falling for Nathaniel Sterling and his broken family. She was letting herself believe in the possibility of something permanent. And for the first time in her life, the risk felt worth it. The progression from careful to inevitable happened faster than Claire expected. Within 2 weeks of that lasagna dinner, she'd stopped going home most evenings. Liam needed help with bedtime, or Nathaniel wanted her opinion on a work problem, or dinner stretched into late conversations that made driving back to her apartment feel like abandoning something important. Her toothbrush appeared in the guest bathroom, then her laptop, then enough clothes that she stopped needing to go home for fresh outfits. Nobody officially suggested she move in. It just happened in increments too small to resist. Sarah noticed immediately. You're living there, she said flatly over coffee one Sunday morning, one of the few times Claire had actually made it back to her own neighborhood. Don't deny it. You've been wearing different clothes every day and you smell like expensive laundry detergent. I'm not living there. I'm just staying there sometimes. Claire, you pay rent on an apartment you haven't slept in for 9 days. That's living somewhere else. Claire wrapped her hands around her coffee mug. The cheap ceramic, a stark contrast to the bone china at Nathaniel's house. It's temporary, until Liam's more stable. Liam or you? What's that supposed to mean? Sarah's expression softened. I'm not judging. I'm worried. You've been there 3 months and you're already playing house with a man who could ruin you without breaking a sweat. What happens when the novelty wears off? When he remembers you're not actually his dead wife? The words hit like a slap. That's not what this is, isn't it? Grieving widower, poor girl who saves his son, convenient replacement for the family he lost. It's a story, Claire, and you're smart enough to know how those stories usually end. You don't know him. And you don't know what it's like when rich men get bored. I've worked for these people for 5 years. They don't marry the help. They use them until something better comes along. Claire wanted to argue, wanted to defend Nathaniel and what they had. But doubt crept in anyway because Sarah wasn't wrong about the optics. From the outside, this looked exactly like what she'd accused it of being, a fantasy that couldn't survive reality. The conversation haunted her all week. She found herself watching Nathaniel for signs that Sarah was right, that this was temporary, that she was a convenient solution to his loneliness and nothing more. But then he'd do something like remember she hated cilantro and order her food without it. Or he'd text her articles about childhood development he thought she'd find interesting. Or he'd look at her across the dinner table while Liam rambled about his day, and his expression would be so openly affectionate that her doubts felt small and petty. Still, the uncertainty gnawed at her. It came to a head on a Wednesday afternoon when Nathaniel's mother showed up unannounced. Claire was in the kitchen with Liam making cookies shaped like animals when the doorbell rang with the kind of insistence that suggested someone important was waiting. Mrs. Patterson answered, and moments later a woman swept into the kitchen with the kind of presence that made the room feel smaller. Eleanor Sterling was in her early 60s but looked a decade younger, dressed in clothing that screamed old money and carrying herself like someone who'd never heard the word no. She stopped short when she saw Claire. "Who is this?" Mrs. Patterson, trailing behind her, jumped in with obvious relief at not having to make introductions. "This is Claire Dawson. She works with Liam." "Works with him how?" Eleanor's eyes raked over Claire's flour-dusted jeans and casual sweater with visible disapproval. "I help with his emotional development, his trauma recovery." I wasn't aware Liam needed help beyond Dr. Morrison. We're seeing a different therapist now, Claire said carefully. Dr. Chen. She's been really effective. Eleanor's expression could have frozen fire. Nathaniel fired Dr. Morrison without consulting me. Liam, who'd been watching this exchange with growing anxiety, spoke up. Dr. Morrison was mean. She didn't like Trunkster. Liam, darling, go play in the other room while the adults talk. Eleanor's voice was steel-wrapped in sugar. But we're making cookies. Now please. Liam looked at Claire with desperate eyes. She gave him a small nod. It's okay. We'll finish later. Take Trunkster and your coloring books to the living room. After he left, Eleanor turned her full attention to Claire. How long have you been working here? 3 months? And your credentials? I'm studying child development. I don't have a degree yet, but I have practical experience and... You're a student, Eleanor said it like an accusation. My son hired a student to treat his traumatized child instead of a licensed professional? Mrs. Sterling, I understand your concern, but Liam has made significant progress. I'm sure you think he has, but you're hardly qualified to make that assessment. Eleanor's voice was acid polite. Where is Nathaniel? At work. He usually comes home around 5. And you're here alone with my grandson, regularly. Claire felt her spine straighten. Yes, that's my job. Your job? Eleanor's laugh was cold. Is that what we're calling it? Because from where I stand, it looks like you've positioned yourself quite comfortably in my son's life. I help Liam, that's all. Don't insult my intelligence. Mrs. Patterson has kept me informed. You're here all hours. You've replaced the nanny, the therapist, and apparently common sense. My son is vulnerable right now. He's grieving, and you've taken advantage of that. The accusation made Claire's blood boil. I haven't taken advantage of anyone. Liam was barely speaking when I started. Now he talks, he laughs, he's processing his grief in healthy ways. If you spent time with him instead of judging from a distance, you'd see that. Eleanor's face went rigid. You have no idea what this family has been through. You're right, I don't. But I know what Liam's been through because I'm here every day watching him heal. Where have you been? The silence that followed was glacial. Mrs. Patterson had gone pale, probably calculating how fast Claire was about to be fired. But Claire was done being intimidated by people who thought money gave them the right to cruelty. I think you should leave, Eleanor said quietly. Now, before I call Nathaniel and have him terminate your employment. You can call him, but I'm not leaving until he tells me to. Liam's upstairs and he needs consistency, not to watch adults he trusts disappear because someone decided I'm not good enough. Not good enough? You're a gold digger who... I'm someone who actually cares about your grandson. Claire's voice shook with anger now. I'm someone who shows up every single day and sits with him in his grief instead of demanding he get over it. I'm someone who sees him as a person instead of a problem. And yeah, I don't have your money or your credentials or your approval, but I have his trust, which is worth more than all of that combined. Eleanor stared at her for a long moment, her expression unreadable. Then she turned to Mrs. Patterson. Call Nathaniel. Tell him to come home immediately. We need to have a family conversation. After she swept out of the kitchen, Mrs. Patterson gave Claire a look that might have been sympathy. You shouldn't have spoken to her like that. Eleanor Sterling destroys people who cross her. Then I guess I'm about to be destroyed. Nathaniel arrived 20 minutes later, his face tight with stress. He found Claire in the living room with Liam, who was pretending to color but was clearly listening to everything happening in the house. My mother's here, he said unnecessarily. I noticed. She's in my office. She wants to talk to both of us. He looked at Liam. Buddy, can you stay here with Mrs. Patterson for a few minutes? Is Grandma mad at Claire? Grandma's just worried. It's going to be fine. But Liam wasn't buying it. If Grandma makes Claire leave, I'm going with her. Nathaniel's expression cracked. Liam, I mean it. Claire stays or I go too. That's the rule. That's not how rules work and you know it. But nobody's making Claire leave, okay? Liam nodded reluctantly, clutching Trunkster like a lifeline. In Nathaniel's office, Eleanor sat in his chair like she owned it. She didn't stand when they entered. Close the door. Nathaniel did, then moved to stand beside Claire in a gesture of solidarity that his mother clearly noticed. I assume Mrs. Patterson told you what happened? Eleanor began. She told me you showed up unannounced and upset Liam. That's all I need to know. Don't take that tone with me, Nathaniel. I'm concerned about my grandson's welfare. This girl, Claire, Nathaniel interrupted. Her name is Claire, and she's not a girl. She's a professional I hired to help Liam. A professional without credentials who's apparently moved into your home. The accusation hung in the air. Nathaniel's jaw tightened. My personal life is none of your business. It is when you are making decisions that affect my grandson. You fired an excellent therapist, hired an unqualified student, and apparently started a relationship with said student while she works for you. Do you have any idea how this looks? I don't care how it looks. Well, you should, because if this relationship falls apart, and relationships like this always do, Liam will be the one who suffers. He's already lost his mother. Now you're setting him up to lose another maternal figure when this inevitable disaster crashes and burns. Claire felt the words land like physical blows. Because Eleanor wasn't wrong. She'd been thinking the same thing for weeks, trying to ignore Sarah's warnings, trying to believe this could work. My relationship with Claire is separate from her work with Liam, Nathaniel said, but his voice lacked conviction. Is it? Because from what I understand, she's here all hours, eating meals with you, essentially living as part of the family. How is Liam supposed to understand those boundaries? How is he supposed to cope when she leaves? She's not leaving. You can't promise that, and you know it. Nathaniel looked at Claire, something desperate in his expression. Tell her this isn't what she thinks. But Claire couldn't, because Eleanor had articulated every fear she'd been suppressing. What happened when this ended? How did Liam survive losing another person he'd attached to? I think your mother has a point, Claire said quietly. Nathaniel's face went white. What? Liam's made incredible progress, but he's also become dependent on me. If something happened, if we broke up or I had to leave, it would devastate him. So we make sure nothing happens. We can't control that. Your mother's right. This was reckless. I let myself get caught up in playing house instead of maintaining professional distance. Professional distance? Nathaniel's voice rose. You're not a robot. You care about him. You care about me. That's not a liability. It's exactly a liability when my job is to help him heal, not to become so entangled in your family that I can't leave without causing damage. Claire felt tears burning behind her eyes. I should have been smarter about this. Eleanor watched them with satisfaction. At least the girl has sense. Don't, Claire said sharply. Don't act like this makes you right. You're not concerned about Liam. You're concerned about appearances, about control, about making sure Nathaniel doesn't make decisions you don't approve of. How dare you? I dare because I've spent 3 months with your grandson while you visited maybe twice. You don't get to show up now and pretend you care about his welfare when you couldn't be bothered to see how he was doing before. My son kept me away. He said Liam needed space. Did you fight for access? Did you insist on being part of his healing, or did you let Nathaniel keep you at distance because it was easier than dealing with a grieving child? Eleanor's composure finally cracked. Catherine was like a daughter to me. Losing her destroyed this family, and watching my son try to replace her with someone completely unsuitable is... Nobody's trying to replace her, Claire's voice broke. I could never replace her. I don't want to. But Liam needs people who love him and show up for him and don't disappear when things get hard. If you can't be that person, fine, but don't sabotage the people who can. The office went dead silent. Eleanor looked like she'd been slapped. Nathaniel stood frozen between them, his expression torn. Then Eleanor stood, gathering her purse with shaking hands. I see I'm not welcome here, but mark my words, Nathaniel, this will end badly. And when it does, don't come crying to me to fix the mess. She swept out, leaving them alone with the wreckage of the conversation. Nathaniel turned to Claire. You can't actually be considering leaving. Your mother's right about one thing. This is complicated, maybe too complicated. So we figure it out. We set better boundaries. How? I'm already living here, Nathaniel. I've already crossed every line. Liam already sees me as a permanent fixture. If this doesn't work out, if we crash and burn like your mother said, how do I leave without destroying him? What if we don't crash and burn? What if we do? They stared at each other across the impossible gulf of uncertainty. Claire wanted him to have answers, wanted him to promise this would work. But he couldn't. Nobody could. I need some air, she said finally. I need to think. Claire, Please, just give me space to figure this out. She left him standing in his office, walked past Mrs. Patterson pretending not to eavesdrop, found Liam in the living room with his coloring. Did Grandma make you sad? Claire knelt beside him, forcing a smile. Grandma is just worried about you. That's what grandmas do. But you're not leaving, right? The question destroyed her. I'm just going for a drive to clear my head. I'll be back. Promise? She wanted a promise, wanted to tell him she'd never leave, that she'd always be there, that his grandmother was wrong, but she couldn't make promises she might not keep. I promise I'll figure this out, she said instead. That's the best I can do right now. She drove aimlessly for an hour, ending up at a park she didn't recognize, sitting on a bench watching kids play while their parents watched, normal families doing normal things, not billionaire widowers and unqualified students, pretending they could build something real out of grief and proximity. Her phone buzzed. Nathaniel. We need to talk. Please come back. Then Liam, using his father's phone. Trunkster misses you. I miss you too. Did I do something wrong? The message broke her. She called Nathaniel immediately. Tell him he didn't do anything wrong. Tell him yourself. Come home. Is it home? Or is it just a place I've been staying while playing pretend? It's home if you want it to be. Claire, please, don't let my mother ruin this. Your mother didn't ruin anything. She just said out loud what I've been thinking for weeks. This is unsustainable. I'm not qualified to be Liam's therapist. I'm definitely not qualified to be his mother figure, and I have no business being in a relationship with you when the power dynamic is this skewed. The power dynamic? Claire, I don't have power over you. If anything, it's the reverse. You have all the power because you can walk away and destroy both of us. That's exactly the problem. Liam's recovery shouldn't depend on whether his father and I can make a relationship work. That's not fair to him. Nathaniel was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice was raw. What do you want me to do? Fire you so we can date properly? Hire someone else for Liam? Because I'll do it if that's what it takes. And break his heart by making me leave? So you stay, but we pretend there's nothing between us? I don't know. The words came out anguished. I don't know what the right answer is. I just know this is a mess and I'm terrified of making it worse. It's not a mess, it's just complicated. People deal with complicated all the time. Not people like us. Not when there's a grieving 5-year-old in the middle whose entire emotional stability depends on us getting it right. So we get it right. We talk to Dr. Chen, we set boundaries, we figure out how to separate your work with Liam from our relationship. But we don't give up just because my mother showed up and poked at every insecurity you've been hiding. Claire closed her eyes, listening to kids laughing in the background. What if I can't do this? What if I'm not strong enough to handle the pressure? You're the strongest person I know. You walked into my house when Liam was barely speaking and brought him back to life. You stood up to my mother without flinching. You made me believe I could be happy again. That's not weakness, Claire. That's courage. Or stupidity. Sometimes they're the same thing. His voice softened. Come back. Let's figure this out together. I can't do this without you. The admission cost him. She could hear it in his voice, the vulnerability of a man who'd learned to function alone, admitting he didn't want to anymore. I'm scared, she whispered. Me too. But I'm more scared of letting you go. She sat there on the bench, watching the sun start to set, and made a choice. Not because it was smart or safe or rational, but because Liam's face floated in her mind, asking if he'd done something wrong, and Nathaniel's voice in her ear sounded like drowning, and she'd never been good at walking away from people who needed her. I'm coming back, but we need to set real boundaries, and we need to talk to Dr. Chen about how to handle this without damaging Liam. Okay, yes, whatever you need. And your mother needs to stay away until we figure this out. Already handled. I told her not to come back until she can be civil. That went well, I'm sure. She hung up on me. But she'll come around eventually. She always does. Claire drove back to the mansion as darkness fell. When she pulled into the driveway, both Nathaniel and Liam were waiting on the front steps. Liam launched himself at her the moment she opened her car door. You came back! Trunkster said you would, but I wasn't sure, and Dad said you just needed to think. But thinking takes a long time. And what if you decided not to come back while you were thinking? Claire held him tight, this small person who'd become so important so fast. I'm back. I promise I'm back. Forever back? or just today back? Let's start with today and see how it goes, okay? Liam pulled back to look at her seriously. Did Grandma say mean things about you? She said worried things. There's a difference. She thinks you're not good enough for us, but she's wrong. You're the most good enough person I know. Over his head, Claire met Nathaniel's eyes. He looked exhausted and relieved and tentatively hopeful. Thank you, she mouthed. He just shook his head slightly. No thanks necessary. That night after Liam finally went to sleep, after extra stories and promises that Claire wasn't going anywhere, she and Nathaniel sat in the living room that had stopped being a museum months ago. Someone had left crayons on the coffee table. Liam's drawings covered the previously pristine walls. The perfect showroom had been invaded by actual life. I meant what I said about boundaries, Claire started. I know. We need to make your mother right. We need to separate my work with Liam from our relationship clearly enough that if things don't work out between us, I can still be in his life professionally. Nathaniel nodded slowly. Dr. Chen first thing tomorrow. We explain the situation and ask for guidance. And no more living here until we figure out what this is. I need my own space, somewhere that's mine. Okay. Really? You're agreeing that easily? You came back. I'm not pushing my luck. He reached for her hand. But for what it's worth, I know what this is, at least for me. What is it? Love. Messy and complicated and probably inadvisable, but love anyway. The word hung between them, terrifying and perfect. You can't just say that. Why not? It's true. I love you, Claire. I love how you see Liam, how you see me, how you don't take anyone's bullshit, including mine, how you make lunch smile and put up with a manipulative 5-year-old and his stuffed elephant, how you walked away today because you were trying to protect Liam even though it was killing you. Nathaniel, you don't have to say it back. I'm not asking you to. I just need you to know that whatever we're figuring out, I'm all in, completely, for better or worse. Claire looked at this man who'd let her into his broken family and trusted her with his son's healing and kissed her like she mattered. This man who was offering her everything she'd ever wanted and everything that terrified her in equal measure. I love you too, she heard herself say, which is either the best or worst decision I've ever made. Probably both. He kissed her then, soft and certain, and for a moment everything else fell away. Eleanor's warnings, Sarah's doubts, the impossible complications, none of it mattered against the simple truth that this felt right in a way nothing else in Claire's life ever had. When they finally pulled apart, Nathaniel rested his forehead against hers. We're going to figure this out. Promise? I promise we'll try like hell. That's the best anyone can do. It wasn't a guarantee, wasn't a happy ending tied up with a bow, but it was honest and real, and maybe that was enough to build on. Upstairs, Liam slept with Trunkster tucked under his arm and his mother's photo on his nightstand. Downstairs, 2 adults tried to believe that love could be enough to overcome impossible odds. And in the morning, they'd start the hard work of proving Eleanor Sterling wrong. Dr. Chen listened to their explanation with the kind of calm that came from years of hearing complicated family dynamics and not flinching. When they finished, she set down her pen and looked at them both with eyes that missed nothing. So to summarize, Claire, you're Liam's primary emotional support and you're in a romantic relationship with his father. You're concerned that if the relationship fails, it will traumatize Liam, and you're here asking me to tell you how to make this work. Basically, Claire said, I can't tell you how to make it work. That's not my job. What I can tell you is whether your current arrangement is harming Liam. Dr. Chen pulled out a folder with Liam's recent session notes. In the 3 months since he started seeing me, Liam has shown remarkable progress. He's processing his mother's death in age-appropriate ways. He's forming secure attachments. He's exhibiting normal childhood behaviors, joy, curiosity, occasional tantrums, all healthy signs. But, Nathaniel prompted, but children Liam's age don't distinguish between professional relationships and family relationships the way adults do. To him, Claire isn't his emotional support specialist. She's the person who makes lunch smile and reads him stories and tucks him in at night. She's a parental figure, whether that's the official title or not. Claire felt her stomach drop. So I'm making things worse? I didn't say that. I said you're a parental figure, which isn't inherently bad. Lots of children have multiple parental figures, step-parents, grandparents, aunts, uncles. The question is whether that relationship is stable and healthy. And if Claire and I break up, Nathaniel asked quietly, then Liam loses another parental figure, which would be traumatic. But Dr. Chen held up a hand before Claire could spiral. The alternative is forcing Claire out of his life now to avoid potential future trauma, which would be immediately traumatic and deprive him of a positive relationship that's actively helping him heal. So you're essentially choosing between definite harm now or possible harm later. That's a terrible choice, Claire said. Welcome to parenting. Every decision is a gamble. Dr. Chen leaned forward. Here's what I actually think. You two are overthinking this. Yes, the situation is complicated. Yes, there are risks, but life is risk. Liam lost his mother in a car accident. That was random and awful, and nobody could have prevented it. Are you going to spend the rest of his childhood avoiding every relationship that might not work out? Because that's not protection. That's isolation. Nathaniel and Claire exchanged glances. So what do you recommend? Nathaniel asked. First, stop treating this like Claire is temporary. If you're committed to this relationship, commit to it. Move forward intentionally instead of pretending you're just seeing what happens. Second, have an honest conversation with Liam about what this means. He's smart enough to handle the truth. Third, build support systems that don't depend entirely on Claire, so if something does happen, he has other people to lean on. My mother, Nathaniel started, your mother needs to be part of Liam's life regardless of how she feels about Claire. He needs his grandmother. And honestly, she probably needs him too. Grief isolates people. Don't let it isolate your family. After the session, they sat in Nathaniel's car in the parking lot, both processing. She basically told us to stop being cowards, Claire said. I think she told us to stop borrowing trouble from a future that might not happen. Same thing. Nathaniel turned to look at her. Move in with me, officially, not sneaking around or pretending it's temporary. Actually move in. That's a terrible idea. Probably, but I'm tired of terrible ideas that feel right being worse than good ideas that feel wrong. Move in with me. Let's tell Liam the truth. Let's stop pretending this is complicated when it's actually simple. It's not simple. It is, though. I love you. You love me. Liam loves both of us. The only thing making it complicated is us trying to protect everyone from hypothetical disasters that might never happen. He reached for her hand. I spent 2 years living in fear of more loss. I'm done with that. I want to live in hope of more joy instead. Claire looked at their intertwined hands. His fingers were steady and sure, like he'd already made his choice and was just waiting for her to catch up. If we do this, if I move in officially, your mother is going to lose her mind. My mother doesn't get a vote. And people are going to talk. They're going to say I'm a gold digger who trapped a grieving widower. Let them talk. I know the truth. You know the truth. That's what matters. And if it doesn't work out, then it doesn't work out and we handle it like adults who love the same kid and want what's best for him. But Claire, you need to stop planning for failure. We can't build something real if you've got one foot out the door. He was right. She knew he was right. She'd been so busy protecting herself from potential heartbreak that she'd missed the actual heartbreak of holding back from something genuine. Okay, she said. Okay, I'll move in. For real this time. Nathaniel's face broke into a smile that transformed him completely. Yeah? Yeah. But we're doing this right. We're telling Liam together, we're setting up my own room so he knows I'm not replacing his mother, and we're having family dinner with your mother even if it kills me. Deal. They told Liam that evening after dinner. He listened with the seriousness of a judge hearing testimony, Trunkster clutched in his lap. So Claire's going to live here forever? He asked when they finished. Not forever exactly, Claire said carefully, but for as long as it works for everyone. Your dad and I care about each other, and we both care about you, and we want to be a family together, but that doesn't mean I'm trying to be your mom. You already had a mom, and she was wonderful. I'm me. Someone who loves you and wants to be here. Liam processed this. Can I still call you Claire? Of course. And you're not going to get mad if I talk about Mom? Never. We can talk about her whenever you want. And if you and Dad stop liking each other, you don't just disappear? Nathaniel fielded that one. If Claire and I ever stop being together as a couple, she'll still be in your life if you want her to be. We'll make sure of it. Because you're the most important person to both of us. Okay? Liam nodded decisively. Then I think it's good. Trunkster agrees. He says Mom would have liked you. The simple statement made Claire's eyes burn. Thank you. That means a lot. Can we have elephant pancakes on Sunday to celebrate? Absolutely. Then it's official. Liam slid off the couch and headed toward the stairs. I'm going to draw a picture of our family for the refrigerator. Everyone needs to be in it, even Trunkster. After he disappeared upstairs, Nathaniel pulled Claire close. That went better than expected. He's a good kid. He is. And he's going to be okay. We all are. Claire wanted to believe it, wanted to trust that this could work. But Eleanor's impending reaction loomed like a storm on the horizon. The storm broke 2 days later when Eleanor showed up for the family dinner Nathaniel had insisted on. She walked in with the posture of someone attending a funeral, took in Claire's presence at the dinner table, and her expression went ice cold. I see you've made yourself quite at home. Claire lives here now, Liam announced proudly. It's official. We had elephant pancakes about it. Eleanor's eyes cut to Nathaniel. You moved her in. I did, and before you start, I don't want to hear it. Claire makes us happy. That's the beginning and end of this conversation. Happy? Eleanor's laugh was bitter. Your wife has been dead barely 2 years, and you're already replacing her. I'm not replacing anyone, Nathaniel said quietly. I'm trying to build a life that doesn't revolve around loss. There's a difference. Catherine deserved better than this. Catherine deserved to be alive. She's not. And I can either spend the rest of my life mourning what I lost, or I can try to find joy in what I still have. I choose joy. Eleanor's composure cracked. How can you say that? How can you just move on like she didn't matter? She mattered more than anything. She still matters. But she's gone, Mom. And I have a son who needs me to be functional, who needs to see that loss doesn't have to be the end of everything. Claire helped me remember that. She helped both of us remember. By swooping in and taking advantage? I didn't swoop, Claire interrupted. I showed up for a single day covering for my sister. Your grandson was barely speaking. This house felt like a tomb. And yeah, I fell in love with both of them while trying to help. But that doesn't make me a villain. It makes me human. Eleanor turned her cold gaze on Claire. You have no idea what this family has been through. You're right, I don't. But I know what Liam's been through because I've sat with him through flashbacks and nightmares and crying jags about missing his mother. I know what Nathaniel's been through because I've watched him learn how to smile again without feeling guilty about it. And I know what you've been through because I see it in your face every time you look at Liam and see Catherine's eyes staring back. The direct hit made Eleanor flinch. Don't presume to understand my grief. I'm not. I'm just saying grief doesn't give you the right to destroy other people's happiness because you're still stuck in yours. The silence that followed was suffocating. Liam had gone very quiet, watching the adults with anxious eyes. Nathaniel looked torn between defending Claire and managing his mother. Eleanor looked like she'd been slapped. Then, unexpectedly, her face crumpled. I miss her, she whispered. I miss my daughter-in-law. And every time I look at you, I see another way she's being erased. The raw grief in her voice transformed everything. This wasn't a vindictive woman trying to cause problems. This was a grieving mother-in-law who'd lost someone she loved and didn't know how to make space for new people without feeling like she was betraying the dead. Claire's anger evaporated. Nobody's erasing her. Look around this house. Her photos are everywhere. Liam talks about her constantly. Nathaniel still wears his wedding ring on a chain around his neck. She's woven into this family in ways that can't be undone. I'm not trying to replace her. I'm just trying to add something new alongside what already exists. Eleanor's eyes found the wedding ring chain, visible at Nathaniel's collar. Something in her expression softened. Catherine would have hated me right now, she said quietly. She always said I needed to stop trying to control everything. She sounds smart, Claire offered. She was. Impossibly smart and stubborn, and she called me on my nonsense constantly. I miss that. I miss her. Eleanor looked at Liam, really looked at him, and her face cracked further. You look so much like her. I know, Liam said softly. Dad says I have her smile. You do. You have her laugh too, when you actually laugh. I haven't heard it much lately. I laugh all the time now. Claire's really funny, and she makes the best animal pancakes, almost as good as Mom's. The comparison could have been an insult. Instead, Eleanor took it as the olive branch it was. Catherine's pancakes were terrible, she said, surprising everyone. She burned them half the time. But she tried so hard and Liam loved them, so she kept making them anyway. The burnt parts tasted like love, Liam said seriously. Eleanor's face did something complicated. Then she looked at Claire directly. I've been unfair to you. You've been grieving. That's not an excuse for cruelty. Catherine would be ashamed of how I've behaved. She took a shaky breath. If my son trusts you with his heart and his child, then I should at least try to understand why. Will you tell me? Why Liam? Why this family? It was the first real question Eleanor had asked instead of an accusation. Claire chose her words carefully. I came here thinking I'd spend one day cleaning floors. Instead, I found a little boy who'd forgotten how to be a kid, and a father who'd forgotten how to be human. And something in me recognized that grief because I've watched people I love drown in it. I couldn't save my friend when we were 12, but maybe I could help save Liam. And somewhere in that process, I fell in love with who they were underneath all the pain, not because they needed saving, but because they were worth loving. Eleanor studied her for a long moment. You really love them. More than I thought I could love anyone. And you'll take care of them, even when it's hard? Especially when it's hard? Eleanor nodded slowly, something releasing in her shoulders. Then I suppose I should stop trying to drive you away and start figuring out how to welcome you in. It wasn't a warm acceptance, wasn't unconditional approval, but it was a truce, and that was more than Claire had expected. Dinner that night was stilted but civil. Eleanor asked questions about Claire's studies, her background, her plans. The interrogation was gentler than before, motivated by genuine curiosity rather than suspicion. Liam narrated everything Trunkster was supposedly thinking, which included detailed opinions about everyone's table manners. And Nathaniel watched his mother and his girlfriend attempt conversation with visible relief. After Eleanor left, promising to visit more regularly, to actually spend time with Liam instead of just worrying from a distance, Nathaniel pulled Claire into his arms. You were amazing tonight. I called your mother out for weaponizing her grief. That's not amazing. That's risky. It's what she needed to hear. What we all needed to hear, honestly. We've been so busy protecting Catherine's memory that we forgot how to make new ones. I don't want to erase her memory. You couldn't if you tried, but you're helping us remember that life doesn't stop just because someone we love is gone. That's not erasure. That's survival. Upstairs, Liam called down. Claire, I need help with my drawing. She climbed the stairs to find him surrounded by crayons and paper, working on his promised family portrait. Catherine was in it, a figure made of stars floating above them, alongside Nathaniel, Claire, Liam, and Trunkster. Mom's watching over us, Liam explained. That's why she's in the sky. But she's still part of the family. Claire felt tears prick her eyes. That's beautiful. Do you think she'd be okay with you being here? I think she'd want your dad to be happy and you to be loved, so, yeah, I think she'd be okay with it. That's what I think too. He added more stars around Catherine's figure. Trunkster says sometimes the best families are the ones you build from broken pieces. Trunkster is very wise. I know. That's why I keep him around. The months that followed weren't perfect. There were hard days when Liam regressed, when grief hit him sideways and he couldn't get out of bed. Days when Eleanor said something thoughtless and Claire had to bite her tongue. Days when Nathaniel got lost in work and forgot to come home at a reasonable hour. Days when Claire wondered if she'd made a huge mistake. But there were more good days. Days when Liam's laughter filled the mansion that had been silent for so long. Days when Eleanor showed up with cookies she'd made herself, teaching Liam her recipes. Days when Nathaniel surprised Claire with flowers for no reason except he'd been thinking about her. Days when the three of them ate elephant pancakes and argued about whether cartoons or chapter books were better. 6 months after Claire officially moved in, Nathaniel proposed in the most undramatic way possible. They were doing dishes after dinner, Liam already asleep upstairs, just existing in comfortable domesticity. Marry me, he said, hands in soapy water. Claire looked up from drying a plate. What? Marry me. Not because we have to, or because it makes sense, or because of Liam, just because I want to spend my life with you and I'm tired of pretending that's not exactly what I'm already doing. That's the worst proposal I've ever heard. Probably. But it's honest. He dried his hands and pulled a ring box from his pocket. Apparently he'd been carrying it around waiting for the right moment and decided there was no right moment, just moments. I love you. Marry me. The ring was simple and beautiful and nothing like the enormous diamond she would have expected from a billionaire. It looked like something chosen with care rather than purchased to impress. "Yes," she said, because there was no other answer. "Yes. Obviously, yes." They told Liam the next morning. His response was immediate and enthusiastic. "Does this mean I can call you Mom?" Claire's heart stopped. "You can call me whatever you're comfortable with. But if you're marrying Dad, that makes you my mom too, right? Not the same as my first mom. My second mom. Is that allowed?" Nathaniel knelt beside him. "You can have as many people who love you as you want. Your first mom will always be your mom. But if you want Claire to be your second mom, that's allowed. That's more than allowed." "Okay, good. Because Trunkster says every kid should have as much love as possible, and you can't have too many moms if they're all good at different things." "What am I good at?" Claire asked, curious, making Lunch smile and listening and not getting weird when I'm sad. Mom was good at other stuff like singing and making up games and knowing exactly how tight to hug. You're both good, but different good. It was the most mature thing Claire had ever heard from a 5-year-old. But Liam had been forced to grow up fast, to understand loss and love in ways other kids his age didn't have to. It wasn't fair, but he was making something beautiful from it anyway. The wedding was small and intentionally imperfect. Eleanor cried through the entire ceremony. Sarah stood as Claire's maid of honor, whispering, "I can't believe this is real," during the vows. Liam served as ring bearer with Trunkster as co-ring bearer, which meant the elephant had his own tiny pillow for the rings. When the officiant asked if anyone objected, Liam raised his hand. The entire room froze. "I object to having to wait until after this to eat cake. Can we do cake first?" The tension broke into laughter. Even Eleanor smiled. "Cake after," Nathaniel told him. "I promise." During the reception, Eleanor pulled Claire aside. "I was wrong about you. I want you to know that. You were grieving. People do strange things when they're grieving." "That's generous. I was cruel." Eleanor's eyes were wet. "But watching you with Liam, watching how Nathaniel looks at you, Catherine would have approved. She would have wanted this for them. Thank you. That means more than you know. Take care of them. They're fragile even when they pretend they're not." "I know. I'm fragile too. We'll take care of each other." Eleanor nodded, then did something unexpected. She hugged Claire, actually hugged her, fierce and tight and full of acceptance. "Welcome to the family, officially this time." Later that night, after the guests left and Liam finally crashed from sugar and excitement, Claire stood in the bedroom she now officially shared with Nathaniel and looked at the ring on her finger. "Having second thoughts?" Nathaniel asked from the doorway. "Just thinking about how weird life is. 6 months ago, I was cleaning houses to pay rent. Now I'm married to a billionaire who proposed while doing dishes. Technically, you were always too good for cleaning houses. I just got lucky you showed up when I needed you. We both got lucky." She turned to face him. "This is insane, you know, all of it. The fact that it worked, that we worked. The best things usually are a little insane." He crossed to her, pulling her close. "Thank you." "For what?" "For making Lunch smile that first day. For staying when my mother was terrible. For loving Liam, for loving me, for being brave enough to believe this could work when every logical reason said it couldn't." "I didn't do it alone." "No, but you did it first. You took the first risk. I just followed your lead." They stood there in the bedroom of a mansion that had stopped being a museum and become a home, holding each other, existing in the improbable happiness they'd built from grief and chance and one smiling sandwich. Downstairs, Liam had fallen asleep on the couch, still clutching Trunkster. His drawing of their family, now including Eleanor and Sarah and even Mrs. Patterson, hung on the refrigerator. The photos of Catherine still smiled from every surface, integrated into their lives instead of hidden away. The past and present woven together, loss acknowledged but not worshipped. Love honored in all its forms, the love that was lost, and the love that was found, and the love that grew in unexpected spaces. Years later, when people asked how they met, Nathaniel always let Claire tell the story about a sick sister and a one-day favor and a lonely mansion where nothing smiled. About a little boy with a stuffed elephant who'd forgotten how to laugh, and a father who'd forgotten how to hope. About the risk of staying versus the safety of leaving and choosing risk anyway. Liam, grown into a teenager who volunteered at children's grief centers, liked to add his own perspective. Claire made my lunch smile first, he'd say, exactly like he'd said when he was 5. Then she made our whole life smile, and then she never left. I thought about leaving, Claire always corrected. I almost left several times. But you didn't, that's what matters. She supposed he was right. In the end, staying was what mattered. Not because it was easy or smart or logical, but because some things were worth the risk of heartbreak. Some people were worth choosing again and again despite the fear. The mansion filled up over the years. More photos. More laughter. Eventually a brother for Liam, a baby whose arrival sent Eleanor into grandmotherly overdrive and made Liam declare himself the best big brother in existence. The silence that had pressed against the walls broke completely, replaced by the beautiful chaos of family. Catherine's memory remained woven through everything, her recipes, her photos, the stories they told. But it was memory that brought comfort now instead of pain, evidence that love didn't die just because people did. On Sunday mornings, they still made elephant pancakes. Liam taught his little brother the tradition, explaining solemnly that the burnt parts tasted like love. Eleanor joined them more often than not, having apparently decided that being present was better than being right. And Claire, who'd walked into this mansion expecting to spend one day scrubbing floors, woke up each morning in a life she'd never imagined wanting, a life built from broken pieces that had somehow fused into something whole. She never did go back to that studio apartment, never needed the safety net of space that was just hers, because somewhere between making lunch smile and teaching a grieving child how to feel again, she'd found something she'd been looking for her whole life without knowing it. She'd found home. Not in a place, but in people. In a little boy who called her mom with Catherine's blessing. In a man who'd learned to hope again. In a grandmother who'd learned to let go. In a family built not from perfect conditions, but from willingness to try. The social workers and child development professors she studied under asked her sometimes about her approach, how she'd managed to reach a selectively mute child when trained therapists had failed, what techniques she'd used, what theories she'd applied. She never knew quite how to explain that there were no techniques, no theories, just the simple decision to sit on the floor with a grieving kid and not try to fix everything, to make lunch smile because happy food tasted better than sad food, to let people feel their grief instead of rushing them past it, to show up and stay, even when staying was terrifying. Love isn't a technique, she'd finally say. It's just the choice to keep showing up. And every time she said it, she thought about that first day, about Liam's whispered confession that everything had been sad food for a long time, about the impossible decision to come back after Eleanor's accusations, about Nathaniel proposing over dishes and Liam announcing they should practice being a family. All the small moments that added up to a life. Sometimes at night, when everyone else was asleep, Claire would walk through the mansion and marvel at the transformation. The toys scattered in previously pristine rooms. The children's drawings covering walls that used to hold expensive art. The noise and mess and beautiful imperfection of it all. This was what healing looked like. Not perfect, not clean, but real and messy and alive. And somewhere she liked to think Catherine was okay with it. Okay with her son finding happiness again. Okay with her son having a second mother who loved him fiercely. Okay with the family evolving to include new people while never forgetting who'd come before. Because that was the thing about love. It didn't run out. It multiplied. One mother's love didn't negate another's. One relationship didn't erase another. There was enough space in Liam's heart for both the mother he'd lost and the mother he'd found. Just like there was enough space in the mansion for grief and joy to coexist. For memories of the past and hopes for the future to sit side by side. That was the lesson neither of them had expected to learn. That healing didn't mean forgetting. It meant making space for new happiness alongside old sorrow. It meant learning to hold both at once without letting either one consume you. Years folded into each other. Liam graduated high school, went to college, chose a career helping other grieving children. The baby brother grew into his own person with opinions and interests and a tendency to dramatically declare everything either the best or worst thing ever. Eleanor mellowed with age, becoming the grandmother who spoiled her grandchildren and only occasionally offered unsolicited advice about life choices. And Nathaniel and Claire grew old together in that mansion that had stopped being silent, watching their family expand and evolve, grateful every day for the improbable chain of events that had brought them together. One smiling lunch, one terrified decision to stay, One 5-year-old boy who'd been brave enough to hope when hope seemed impossible. That was all it took to transform everything. And in the end, that was the story worth telling. Not about a billionaire who found love or a poor girl who married rich, but about broken people who chose to heal together, who chose vulnerability over safety, who chose to believe that loss wasn't the end of everything, who chose again and again to make the food smile. Because happy food really did taste better than sad food, and life was too short to settle for sad.